So a couple videos back, I demoed all the different green pumpkins on the market to help you guys find your favorite one. Now doing that left me with a bunch of green pumpkin remelt. So I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do with that remelt to kind of make something a little interesting. Now one of the most common questions that I get, especially after making my tube video, was what salt do you use in plastics and can you use table salt? So what I've done, I melted all of my green pumpkin down together in one giant cup. I poured out 3 individual cups of plastic, the exact same amount of plastic, the exact same plastic, and I'm going to test the 3 most commonly referred to salts in soft plastics and see, is there a difference? Can you get away with table salt? And what are the results? So let's get over here and check it out. So as I mentioned, I have 3 cups of plastic. This is identical plastic. It is all 1 cup per cup. We are going to test one with some fine just table salt. We're going to test another with salt from an actual plastics company, this one being Bait Plastics. And then the third and final cup, we're going to test what you'll hear people either refer to as flour salt or popcorn salt. That'll be in the third. We are going to make some 6-inch stick baits and what everyone refers to as the Yamamoto salt content level. For every 1 cup of plastic, a 1/4 cup of salt. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to start with the first one, get all this melted down, add our salt, and get to testing. So we've got our first cup melted down. Now what I've done is I have leveled off 1 cup or 1/4 cup exactly. I'm going to do this with each brand or each type of salt just to get rid of as many variables as possible. And we're just going to slowly add this while stirring. You are going to notice with any type of salt that it will add a lot of bubbles when you first add it into your plastic, but when you throw this back in the microwave to reheat it, just let it sit in the microwave when it's done for an extra 20-30 seconds, and those bubbles will rise to the top and pop, and you're good to go. One other thing to mention when adding salt to plastics at all is the salt will try to settle on the bottom. So you want to make sure to get everything stirred in really well, and then before you inject your plastic, you'll want to give it another good stir just so that if any of that salt has settled on the bottom, you get a nice even distribution of your salt. So as you can see here, it cools the plastic off really fast. So we're going to get this heated back up, and then we're going to inject our first round. We're ready to go with this first one. One thing to make note of, especially with stick baits, is you want to inject your plastic very cold to prevent denting. So we're going to inject these around 300 degrees. Now let's take a look and see how these turned out. So there you go. They look great. So for any of you wondering about table salt, yes, you can use table salt in your plastic. So it looks like on this one, there might be a tiny little clump right there that may not have mixed in all the way, but overall, you can get away with it. Now, you're not going to be able to really tell much of the comparison after run 1, so let's get to the second round, and then we'll keep on moving. So we have cup number 2 ready, our nice even 1/4 cup of salt. And again, this is, I'm just going to consider this salt from a plastics manufacturer. Like I said, this one is from Bait Plastics. I know LURES makes some. I'm sure there's more out there, but this is what I got. So this one, compared to the table salt, the initial mixing it in seems to be a little bit more stirring. I think part of that is the particles of salt on these are a lot smaller, and a big clump fell out when pouring it in, so part of that's on me. But either way, we're going to continue to get this all stirred in nice and evenly. We're going to get this heated back up to get rid of some of those bubbles, and then we'll inject round 2. We're ready to take a look at the second round with the bait plastics salt. And as expected, looks really good. Now, if you're wondering why I'm making all three of these like this, I want to compare them all side by side at the end and see if there's a difference in color. Because as a lot of you know, adding salt or any other additive for that matter can alter the color of your plastic. So I'm curious to see if the type of salt, if it actually varies the color change any at all. So here's two. Let's get on to the last one. So we're ready to go with the third and final round with our popcorn salt or flour salt, whatever you want to refer to it as. All right. So we're going to get this all mixed in like normal. I can, from first impression, kind of like what I was just referring to, it looks like this one is going to like lighten up the color a lot more than the others. But we'll see once we get it all wrapped up and in a bait. So here we go with our third and final round. And as I expected, because of the way it looked in the cup, this color is a lot different than the first two. So this particular salt lightened or brightened the color, whichever way you want to refer to it, a lot. So let's grab the other two and take a look at all these a little bit closer. So here's an up-close look at the three samples that we've got. We've got our table salt on the left, the bait plastic salt in the middle, and then our flour salt on the right. Now these two over here, there is a very, very small difference in the two. The bait plastic salt, due to the smaller particles, are just a little bit lighter. You can see it in person, but on camera, they look almost identical. But then you can see over here with the flour salt, it drastically changes the color of the bait. Now, is this a bad thing? No. It just means if you're trying to dial in a specific color for flour salt, you might need to add your salt first and then build your color. Because as you can see here, you don't want to get your color dialed, then add that salt, because you can see how much it alters the color of the bait. So that is test number one, which is, does it work and does it change the color? So why would you add salt to your plastics? There is a big debate on people that love salt, people that hate salt, and there's people that just don't care. However, there are two things that are undeniable about adding salt to your bait. It increases the sink rate and it adds weight. So we're going to run through a few more tests over here. We're going to see how much the salt affects the actual flexibility of the bait. We're going to test the actual weight difference and then look at the sink rate. Now we know weight and sink rate are going to be a benefit compared to a non-salted bait. However, what I'm really curious to see are, do the types of salts affect either one of those? So let's get back over here to the table and let's get to testing. So you can see here we have a few different things set up. Now this set of stick baits over here is kind of our sample. These are unsalted stick baits. Then we have our table salt, bait plastic salt, and our flour salt. Now if you look over here, the one in the back is unsalted. You've got your table salt, bait plastics, and your flour salt. And if you look really close, the one with table salt does not droop down as far. So I think that has to do with the particles of salt being larger. It almost stiffens the bait up compared to the other three. And then it is very minor, but the bait plastic salt actually has the most amount of sag, and that is due to weight. Let me show you. So we're going to run through these one at a time. We're going to start with our unsalted. Now I'm going to weigh all four because the differences in one stick bait are going to be very minor. So as you can see, unsalted, we're sitting at 52 grams for 4 stick baits. Now we're going to move on to the table salt, and we are sitting at 61 grams. Now moving on to bait plastics, we are at 63 grams, which is that minor additional weight that I was referring to. And then last and certainly not least, we have our flour salt. We are sitting at 60 grams for that. So there are the results of the flex test and then the weight test. So the flex test, the table salt was the biggest outlier. It almost stiffened the bait a little. The other two are pretty minor. The bait plastics flexed a little bit more, and I think that was just due to the weight difference. Speaking of weight, so at the lightest, we had the unsalted at 52 grams. Then we had our flour salt at 60 grams. Then table salt at 61 grams, and then our bait plastic salt at 63 grams. And again, that is for 4 6-inch stick baits. Now, to eliminate as many variables as possible, like I said, I took all of the green pumpkin remelt from the green pumpkin video. I put it in a giant 4-cup measuring cup, melted it all down together, stirred it all up, and then poured the 3 individual cups so they are all the exact same plastic. When I added the salt, I made sure each one of those 1/4 cup measuring cups was flat to the top to make sure we eliminated as many variables as possible. Now, obviously, there is human error, so if you're just scooping out salt and dumping it, your results might vary slightly. Now, we've got one more test to do, and that is the sink test. So let's get everything set up and see if it works. So last but not least, it's time to water test. Now, this is the control with no salt, and as you can see, does not sink. Now, I know some plastisol companies like Dead On Plastics does make a sinking blend. However, we are not testing plastisol companies. We are just comparing salt. So here's our first sample with table salt. Now we're going to go to our second sample with the bait plastic salt. And sample number 3 is our flour salt. So as you can see, there was very, very minimal difference, if any at all. So let's do these one more time. We've got our table salt, our bait plastic salt, and our flour salt. We're going to drop these a couple more times. Now what I've done is I've taken just a wacky rig hook and rigged them right through the middle. I rigged every one the exact same from the seam mark of the mold to the other seam mark, and that's going to act as kind of a ballast, because as you saw in the first couple, when we drop it, some kind of go down head first, tail first, some go down even. This will kind of even the playing field and act as a ballast to get them to lower exactly the same. So table salt, bait plastic salt, and flour salt. And there you have it, guys. That is our comparison of the 3 different salts that we used. One thing of note that you guys can't see, but I could tell while mixing these, the flour salt suspends in the plastic a lot better. As I mentioned, you need to stir right before you inject with salt. So the table salt sunk and settled the most. Then the bait plastic salt was kind of average, I guess you could say. But the flour salt actually impressively stayed suspended throughout the plastic and didn't settle quite as much as the others. So at the end of the day, guys, it's ultimately your decision on what you want to use. I've dropped all of these baits more times than I can count, from every angle, from different heights, from any variable you could think of. There really wasn't a difference. I didn't see a standout between the 3. They all seem to sink and shimmy very, very similar. Not enough for me to notice a difference anyway. So the only key points, I guess, that you could take away from this is you can pretty much use whatever salt you want. The table salt did stiffen the plastic just a little bit, but as you could see in the tank drops, there really wasn't a huge noticeable effect. You get that very slight weight advantage from using the salt from bait plastics, and then the flour salt, you will get way better suspension of salt throughout your plastic. However, you do have that major color or discoloration of that salt. So it's ultimately your choice, and that is the beauty of this hobby. You can make whatever you want, with, without, however you wanted to go about it. But for all of you that stuck around this long, hopefully you liked this video. If you did, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel. We'll see you on the next one.